This is the official podcast of the G20 Interfaith Forum, where we discuss the key events, the goals, and the focus of the organization. Welcome to another episode of the G20 Interfaith Forum podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Stuart Bird.
And I'm the co-host, Mariana Richardson.
And we're excited because today we get to have a conversation with Audrey Kitagawa. Mariana, would you mind introducing Audrey?
Oh, I would love to. We have so enjoyed working with Audrey with IF20 for the last 3 or 4 years. And I just am always in awe at all that Audrey does. Audrey is the president and founder of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation. And she has done so much work all over the world. I have always been so impressed with all that she's been able to accomplish and do. She is also, she has a JD from Boston College. She is also a cum laude from the Pre-Law Honor Society, graduate of the University of Southern California. She practiced law in Honolulu, Hawaii. And then she has just continued doing all kinds of wonderful things with her law degree, and specifically in the areas of worrying about children, women, and anti-racism. In terms of her work with IF20, she is currently the vice chairman of the communication team, but she also is the chair of the Anti-Racism Initiative. And she has done so much on gender equality working group, but also a member of the Advisory Council for G20 Interfaith Forum. She is also the former advisor to the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children and Armed Conflict at the United Nations. And I know right now she's an inaugural member of the Faith for Earth Interfaith Women Council and is a UN representative for the URI, United Religions Initiative. So Audrey, we are just so excited to have you work with us at IF20. And I'm always amazed at what you're doing and all the things that you are accomplishing and the people that you help throughout the world.
Well, thank you so much, Mariana.
Yeah, Audrey, that is an impressive bio, and I want to focus a little bit on your background first. As shown in your biography, you've done a lot of work at the intersection of spirituality, law, and global diplomacy. So what initially inspired you to dedicate yourself to this work?
Well, thank you so much, Stuart. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. From childhood, I've always wanted to be of help to others. And I wanted to be a candy striper and volunteered many hours at the local rehabilitation center when I was in intermediate school. And in order to make my mom commit to what she said was okay for me to do, I actually created a contract when, when I was in intermediate school, and I made her sign it so that we would have it documented that she did give her approval. And she was so shocked. I don't think she ever signed a contract prior to that time. So I guess that was a little foretelling of the future of what my profession would be. And of course, when I was growing up in elementary school, if I saw a bird with a broken wing, I would bring it home to nurse it back to health. If I saw a stray cat that was injured or hungry, that cat came home with me. And at one point in time, the one stray cat grew into a population of 13 cats and kittens. And I also knew that I wanted to be a lawyer from a very young age because I imagined that I would stand up for the marginalized, work on issues of justice, and help write the laws that would create positive change for the disenfranchised. So there were high-minded, but these were, very high-minded, but rather naive, I would say, in retrospect, inexperience at life due to my young age. And, you're very idealistic in those days until, you go through life's experiences. But the beauty is that you can retain your idealism, which really helps, life itself helps you to open your eyes to what changes you need to make in order to go through life, but not lose your aspirational goals. So my work might be described really as a calling, one that I inherently understood that I would dedicate my life to, but which really began in earnest when I gave up my career as an attorney. And I have to say, I really loved my career practicing in Hawaii, practicing law. But when I met my spiritual mother just before I left for law school, first thing that she said to me was, "You cannot serve two masters." Inherently, I understood in my heart what she meant, but could not conceive at the time how that would unfold. And a few years later, after years of splitting my time between a thriving law practice and shepherding the spiritual lives of my spiritual mother's community, I closed my law office to dedicate my life to service. And thereafter, I would no longer serve two masters. So shortly after that, I moved to New York City, and along the way was blessed with many, sometimes miraculous experiences that unfolded, guiding me forward along my path. And in 1996, I was involved in the organization of the State of the World Forum, where it has usually convened in San Francisco, but the executive director at that time wanted to convene in New York City. And as part, because of the millennium and all the world leaders coming to the UN to give their presentations, we thought that we would want to have a concurrent conference at the same time so the presidents and world leaders could also attend our forum and talk about the global issues. So we approached Olara Otunu, who was then the Undersecretary General of the and Special Representative for the Office of Children and Armed Conflict. And shortly after that, and he did come and gave a keynote speech. He was very articulate, exceedingly bright. And then the next thing I knew, I was at the UN as his advisor. And so basically, my work as an international advisor for the Office of Children in Armed Conflict drew me into the world of international diplomacy and humanitarianism, and where I really had the privilege to forge relationships with diplomats, humanitarians, activists, scholars, and faith leaders, and engaged with people and organizations around the world. So, my years of work at the United Nations and in the interfaith community has provided opportunities for me to meet so many really inspiring, influential people from all walks of life and many different traditions from all over the world. So, my work has been really the intersectionality of spirituality, law, and global diplomacy as it has unfolded over the years and eventually resulted in the establishment of the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation and my engagement with the G20 Interfaith Forum.
It's inspiring for me to hear that uh, a lot of this drive that you've had began with your faith, with your religion. And that's what we hope for here at the G20 Interfaith Forum is that people will be driven by their faith in what they believe in. And so that's amazing to see how you then took that and have started. You mentioned your work at the UN. You mentioned starting the International Academy for Multicultural Cooperation.
Audrey, I know that last year our theme for IF20 when, while we were in Brazil was leave no one behind, specifically targeting the most vulnerable. And I know this year, now that we're going to be in South Africa and working a large part with the African Union, we're kind of having that same focus in the different priority areas that we're dealing with and other things for IF20, looking specifically towards the most vulnerable. And I just so appreciate all that you've done to help that community throughout the world. I think you are such a sterling example of the positive that we can do to help these people. I did have a question though for you as we look forward to, like I said, you've also done so much service and help with IF20 and specifically in your anti-racism initiative. I would love to also hear some of your thoughts on the things that you feel like you've accomplished within IF20.
Well, IF20 has been a tremendous international platform to really give highlights to this important issue. And race, to be able to study the whole racism aspect, the how it's systemic and structural, how it appears in communities and even in different faith traditions, and in our policies. It goes so deeply into the psyche and behaviors of whole communities as well as whole countries. So it is something that we continuously need to give voice to, because it continues this hierarchical structure of domination and control, and it really strips the individual dignity, the collective dignity of those persons, those communities, those races that are so marginalized and so dehumanized that it can create tremendous consequences, including genocide, including, hate speech with horrible consequences for people. And I think we see that played out throughout history, as well as we can see it in our everyday lives and in our international and national and local policies. So, this kind of raising awareness on how racism manifests and to be able to have voices sharing different perspectives and different solutions are very important for everyone to be able to hear, because many people are not aware. They just think it's an aspect of life. They're not looking at it through, a lens of the ethnocentricity as well. So, I mean, when I went to college and my sociology professor brought up the term ethnocentricity, I mean, I had no clue what that meant, but it was such an eye opening concept for me. And I said right then and there, this was worth coming to college for, just to learn this word. So, this importance of perspectives and how perspectives are shaped and how we can go through life really unaware of how our perspectives influence our thinking, our worldview, our actions, and our relationships becomes very, very profound and important for us to be able to understand. And of course, together, it help us to become more aware and self aware people, and the importance of how insights and self awareness are really positive aspects to create internal personal transformation. And as important, valuable members of the human family and as society, self awareness and insight is so important to help us to be able to develop more fully into compassionate, empathetic, kind, and loving human beings. So, I think it's so important for all of us to be able to understand um, how these important platforms like IF20 help all of us to become better people. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Audrey, for all of your work on the Anti-Racism Initiative, particularly, and also your help with communication in general. I do think that the webinars that you have also helped us produce have been significant in terms of that whole idea of the discussion that we all need to be a part of throughout the world. And so thank you so much for all that you've done in that area.
Well, thank you. And I would refer everyone to the IF20 website, because all of our webinars and the archive of our webinars can be seen. And whether it's in anti-racism or the environment or, human trafficking. So it becomes a treasure trove, a valuable library of these important conversations that the IF20 has provided that platform to have. And of course, it goes to the whole aspect of the importance of communication.
Yeah. Audrey, that reminds me of something that we say a lot on this podcast, which is that the first step is informing, being informed and informing others of issues. And it sounds like that's something that your webinars, your organization focuses on is let's be informed citizens and let's help other people be informed as well. What you said also reminds me of one of the objectives of the G20 Interfaith Forum, which can be found on our website, um, which is to facilitate constructive dialogue between societal leaders in faith, government, business, media, education, and other social institutions on how interfaith resources can enhance social, economic, and cultural policies and programs for the well-being of all. And I think you focused on that, is that last part of that objective is we do this for the well-being of all. And so thank you for focusing on that. We talked a little bit about what you've done so far with IF20 and what you've enjoyed about being part of IF20. I'd love to hear from Mariana what the vision is for the future of IF20 and how Audrey's going to help us with that.
Well, I'm so excited that Audrey's willing to help us as we reshape some of the things that we're doing at IF20. I want you to know that that wonderful mission statement that you read, Stuart, will always be the essence of what IF20 is. That's never going to change. But one of the things that as we talk about IF20 2.0, we're really discussing what we can do to do this more intentionally, to make sure that our the things that we are trying to accomplish in different parts of the world become truly more grounded in the different areas. I think some of the things that we're hoping to accomplish is to have IF20 groups throughout the world in different areas. We're looking at Europe and Indonesia and other places where IF20 groups would continue this discussion, but also that we will do more on the ground helping people. That is also something we're looking forward to. I know as we look forward to South Africa this year, when we're in South Africa, we're going to be doing series of basically on the ground help there in different parts of South Africa to be able to help people, like we said, those in most need, those most vulnerable. And so I see that kind of as the future, that we do more hands-on, that we are more, we still have the discussions, we still have the education, we still have the webinars, but that we also do more specifically for the people in need. And I am so excited because Audrey is also going to be helping us with this new 2.0. And I would love to hear Audrey's ideas in terms of as we think and talk about what IF20 can and should become.
Thank you so much for that, Mariana. First of all, what's really exciting for me is the fact that there is a whole, communication section because I really want us to acknowledge the importance of communication. I mean, it's the whole process of conveying information, ideas, thoughts, and feelings from one person to another. And, communication is so vital for building relationships and resolving conflicts, achieving common goals, whether in personal or professional settings. So it's really the foundation of understanding, cooperation, and progress. And I'm very excited about being able to expand our work to also specific programs and projects on the ground to give it concrete, moving from the philosophical, ideological to actual action on the ground. Because our lives are units of time. And, what we do with our time ultimately establishes the legacy of our lives. So, in faith traditions, it's especially important to be able to help others, to have selfless service, to understand what it means to sacrifice, to be able to help others. So, all of the important principles of our faith in action get to be revealed and manifested in what we do to help the poor, to help the marginalized, to serve others selflessly. So, because of my own experience on the ground in these conflict countries, to actually be able to see the importance of faith communities and their dedicated work in helping the poorest of the poor and the marginalized. And it's so important. It really does save lives. So this is where you move from the talk story to the lives in action, applying the values and the teachings of your faith tradition. So, it makes me very happy to hear that IF20 will be developing that aspect as well, because we have to be able to demonstrate in action our values and our beliefs. So, it really is the whole process that we establish in developing these collaborations and address problem solving and transferring information, knowledge, and wisdom through life's experiences. And this is really the foundation and the basis of all relationships. And since we are really social beings having harmonious cooperative relationships that have as a shared goal addressing these global challenges that abound, where we can work together for the betterment of the communities on the ground and humanity as a whole. So this is what really gets me very excited.
I did want to just make one other comment, Stuart. Specifically, one other thing that we really want to do with IF20 is to get the next generation involved. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so glad that Stuart joins us on this podcast, because I do think that as we talk about IF20 2.0, another thing that we really want to do is to mobilize your generation to help us in this effort. And so thank you for being on this podcast with us as well.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me and the rising generation um, join. I've learned a lot. I think going back to the importance of being informed, I think that's the biggest benefit so far is that I've just learned about a lot of issues that I wasn't aware of before. And I think additionally, Audrey, you're doing a lot to help the rising generation, obviously with the work you've done for women and children. Um, so, so thank you. Audrey, the G20 Interfaith Forum seeks to integrate faith-based perspectives into global decision making, which to a lot of people might seem strange, especially as this world is becoming more and more secular, and faith is becoming less and less a part of politics and decision making. So, how do you see religions and faith making a more active role in shaping international policies?
Well, I just, want to acknowledge that since most of the world's population, I believe over 80%, are adherents to some faith tradition, that this representational aspect of, is so significant of the global population. So, and there's so many of the world's religions and spiritual paths share fundamental values and truths that are foundational to the development of our moral and ethical compass, which is exceedingly important to develop. And as trusted stewards of the moral and ethical conscience of their communities, faith leaders, adherents to these fundamental core spiritual values of compassion, fairness, equality, love, and the respect for each individual as a sacred being are so important because it helps us to keep our orientation that we are dealing with really sacred beings. So, the faith leaders' advocacy for moral and ethical international policies really begins at the grassroots level within their own communities, wherever they may be situated. And change begins with a transformation of the consciousness of each individual. And faith leaders are the trusted voices of their communities as representatives of their communities for the conscience and morality, which are to be expressions of how we apply in daily life these sacred teachings. So, I really feel that the IF20 being such an incredible platform that continues to grow and evolve is so exciting to be a part of that. And I really want to encourage the continuation of growth and development as we evolve over time. And, this is the rising level of the consciousness of the organization, the people who support it, that speak so well of the importance of civil society engagement as the awakening of the global sleeping giant, to be able to learn the ways and how we must learn to take care of each other, even in the face of failed states and government action, that, we must be able to develop the citizen resilience and those values that call us to help each other. And I firmly believe that when we continue to move from our hearts of compassion and kindness, that we can be well positioned to help each other where governments may not be able to.
I just 100%. I just so agree with everything that Audrey said, especially in the geopolitical world that we live in right now and all the issues that so many people are dealing with and that seems so negative. I think that we can rise up and help each other. And especially when we talk about the fact that governments might not be there for our safety net. Instead, we can be each other's safety net. And what a powerful opportunity to, as organizations and as religions, to be able to go out and to help, especially those that are particularly vulnerable during this time. We're talking women, children, but those that we need to really reach out and help and make sure that they are safe. So I just love your vision, Audrey, and I do want to say I just love working with you. I do, I want to make sure that everybody understands that you have been such an integral part of our organization, and we so appreciate the service that you've done with us.
Well, thank you so much, Mariana, and the great team that you pulled together. And, it's just been a wonderful, wonderful experience to work with such fantastic people, dedicated people, committed people. And of course, to see the continuous evolvement, change, and growth is also very inspiring, because evolvement, growing, and the expansion of the consciousness that ever grows into infinity is what we are demonstrating in this platform, and it really is a model of what's taking place on the bigger world stage and beyond. So I think it's just totally wonderful. I am totally supportive of it, and your leadership as a chair of the communications committee, Mariana, has just been exemplary. And honestly, I don't know how you do all that you do.
Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you both. Thank you so much to our listeners for joining us for another episode of the G20 Interfaith Forum podcast.
The podcast provides information and discussions on the G20 Interfaith Forum, but the views expressed are those of the individuals involved and not necessarily the official stance of the forum.
The content is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice or expert recommendations. Listeners should exercise personal responsibility, seek professional guidance, and conduct further research when making decisions based on the podcast.
The information shared may not always reflect the most current developments, and external links or resources are provided for additional information but are not endorsed or controlled by the podcast.
By listening to the podcast, listeners acknowledge and accept these disclaimers. Please be aware that the content of this podcast may be subject to copyright. Unauthorized copy, distribution, and reproduction of any part of the podcast is prohibited.